late start, but it's Shabbat. We have nowhere else to go anyway. And we have a delicious lunch afterwards, so that'll be fun. All right. Is everybody having a good Shabbat so far? Can you all hear me okay? Yes. I'm figuring that in this room I don't need the hookup. It'd be okay. All right. We're going to begin with the shortened version of Ma Tovu. How good it is that we're all gathered here together. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel. Just the first two lines, Ma Tovu.
It's a folk song, so I'll kind of niggun the first part, and then you join in with the words.
Okay.
La 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 la
Page 192. Try to focus on just a few prayers and try to make them beautiful as opposed to, going through all the standard prayers that we do. So we won't run the service any longer, but we'll just focus on just a few prayers. And what do these prayers mean? And why do we do them? So the next prayer that I'd like for us to take a look at is a very simple one. It's the Baruch, and you can find that on page 222. Excuse me, not page 222, page 226. And hold on. So what is this prayer about? Why is the Baruch number one? Why do we stand for it? And why is its placement in this part of the service? Well, the Ma Tovu is an introduction. In the tradition, people would prepare themselves for the more intense part of the service. The introductory part in Hebrew is called the Psuke de Zimra, which means verses of Zimras, like song. But what they're referring to are psalms. And psalms in the Jewish tradition, and if you've read some psalms, you know that they can be very comforting and also touch on our personal situation. All of you may be familiar with Psalm 23. If you've ever been to a funeral, Jewish or non-Jewish, Psalm 23 is read. Why is it read? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. In other words, even in this most painful time in my life, God is with me. So many psalms are like that. They give comfort. And they get us in the mood for prayer, for what we call obligatory prayer, prayers that have been with us for generations and comprise the Siddur. Now, you say, well, I really like the Union Prayer Book. And, this is all Greek to me. They need a new prayer book. I've heard this, by the way. I've heard this complaints about this. Rest assured, even in the Hebrew, because I looked last night, 99% of what we do on Friday night and 99% of what we do here that's in this prayer book is in the Union prayer book, even in the Hebrew. It's just the structure is a little bit different and the English is a little bit different, but the Hebrew, the core is exactly the same. And if you want that, we can have a class in that. So what is the Baruch Hu about? What is the Baruch Hu is said everywhere. It's said in Reform, Conservative, Orthodox. It's about what? I mean, it's not hard. Baruch Hu, we are blessing God. Baruch Hu is a command. Come, let us bless the one who gives blessing. Baruch Adonai, and then we bless. It's the only place where we bless God, really. Baruch Adonai, blessed is God, the one who blesses forever. In other words, it's a prayer of gratitude, that no matter where we are in life, when we come to pray, we give thanks to God. We thank God for everything that we have, both the good and even the difficult times, because even the difficult times give our lives meaning and give our lives substance. And by the way, that's a universal thing. That in the book, what is it, Joy, I think it's called Joy, and it's a conversation between the Dalai Lama. Don't worry about the time. I promise you we're going to end in an hour. Don't worry about time. Everybody's going on and on. We're going to do prayers, but we're going to learn something. Like what's behind? That's how you build a congregation. That's how you build a kehillah. So it's not me just saying that. It's the Dalai Lama and it's Archbishop Desmond Tutu. They wrote this book called Joy, and it's a dialogue between the two. And they say you can't really know joy, both of them, right? Both of them, you can't really know joy unless you've experienced the opposite, which can be a crisis, which can be a troubling time in one's life. And that's the ups and downs, the peaks and the valleys of life, the good and the difficult. And we need that in our lives. So we bless God for the totality of our lives, even for those things that have been challenging, that all of us have been challenged, particularly those of us like me who've grown a little bit older, not like all of you who are a little bit younger, and are that's what we're going to do. And so that's why we rise. Now, do you need a minyan to say the Baruch Hu? Do you need 10 people? Why do you need 10 people? It's very interesting, very interesting. You remember the story about the spies who they were commanded by Moses and Joshua to go spy out the land of Israel and then come back with a report? Remember that story? Does anybody not remember that? If you don't, just raise your hand. It's no big. I can take 2 sentences and explain. Moses sends forth the people to go spy out the land before they go to conquer it. And so he picks 10 because there's 10 tribes. And so these 10 come back. I think it's 12 actually because of Joshua and Caleb. It doesn't matter. They come back with a bad report saying, we can't conquer the land. We're not big enough. Meanwhile, they're told by God, trust, you're going to go and you're going to come into the land of Israel. Don't worry about it. But they come back saying, we can't go. And they get all nervous and they get all upset. And God says to the people, how long must I endure this evil congregation? I talked about that last night. How long must I endure this complaining by this evil congregation? And why? Because there were 10 spies who came back with a bad report. So because God referred to them as a congregation, as an ha'idah, and it was 10, therefore we need a minyan to say certain kinds of prayers that refer to God being blessed. So that's why we need 10. So how many we have here? 4, 5. Well, we have 10. Okay. Do we have people online? No. Okay. But good. We can say this service we didn't have anybody online, and everybody came in person. It's a beautiful chavra, beautiful community. So let's rise and let's do it 2 or 3 times so you can all get the hang of it. I see that there are members. How many of you are members of Maggie's Hebrew class? Wow, 4 out of 10. So 40% of our congregation is owed to Maggie. So let's first read the Hebrew, okay? Try to cover up the Maybe you've done this prayer in her, because I know she's transitioning you to the prayer book. So let's go very slow on the Hebrew first. Excuse me, page 226. Yep. And let's just say the words together. Now, if you can't read the Hebrew, and of course you need the phonetics, go ahead. But I know with Maggie, she'd say, everybody in my class can read this. I mean, she's so proud of you guys. You have no idea. It's all I hear at the dinner table. This one read today. This one read today. You should hear this person read. I won't name names. Yeah, it really means a lot to her. So let's try it together, real slow. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamivorach. You guys sound great. Wow, it's terrific. Let's go on. Baruch Adonai Hamivorach leolam ba'ed. Beautiful. Okay, now let's put it to music. Okay, Molly,
We'll
please.
do the traditional since we're kind of learning about everything. So. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamivorach. Baruch Adonai Hamivorach leolam vaed.
Let's do that one more time. I heard you pretty good, but get a little more confidence, right? So let's do it again. Okay? Please.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamivorach. Baruch Adonai Hamivorach leolam vaed.
They may be seated. Okay. Let's go to the Shema. All right, that'll be the next thing that we'll do. And just be seated. So what does the Shema mean to you? What is the meaning of the Shema to you? Anybody want to take a guess? And if you want to talk about the first paragraph, you can. Why do you think the Shema is here? I mean, it's so important, right? We've all learned it at some point in our lives, right? I mean, everybody is. Is anybody not familiar with the Shema? It's anybody not? It's okay if you. Yeah, I shouldn't. The Shema is really. I've said this so many times from Bima. The central declaration of our faith. And by the way, it's not God who's commanding us to say the Shema. It's actually Moses. This is a speech that Moses gives, not God. And it's in every prayer book. It's in Reform, the Shema and the V'ahavta is in every Siddur. If it's not in every Siddur, then it's wrong. It's on page 232, 252, excuse me, 252. No, I was right the first time, 232. I need my glasses, the print's small here. 232. So what do you think this declaration is all about? Yes, James.
I think that it says that God is one. So I think that God is one.
Yeah. God is one. God is not divisible. Right. And just from a theological standpoint, that God being one separates us. And I don't mean this in any critical way. It just is a distinction between us and those who believe in Jesus as the Son of God. There is no other divinity other than God in Judaism. There's no sub-divinity. Moses is not. Moses is just a prophet. He's a human being. All the prophets are just human beings. We don't bestow any divinity upon them. So oneness also refers to a uniqueness. And this Moses didn't say, but many commentators have said, God in some sense is beyond human comprehension. We really can't, there's a uniqueness to God that is ultimately not knowable. all we can have is a part of that. Why do you think the word Eloheinu, it's very repetitious in God, right? There's all these different names. Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad, right? We say the name of God is said in this verse a number of times. God, Eloheinu, our God, Adonai, God, Echad, unique. Why do you think, now I'll give you, when the word Adonai is used, it refers to the compassionate side of God, not the judgmental side, not the God who comes down and renders judgment in traditional Judaism. Adonai refers to a compassionate attribute. Why do you think we have Adonai and why do we have Eloheinu here? Yes, there's no right or wrong answer. Yes, Michelle.
Different aspects of how we view God.
Yeah. Yeah.
God
How do we view God? How do you all think about God? Your relationship to God. Anyone want to volunteer?
Powerful.
What's that?
Powerful.
Powerful. Very good.
I feel like it's the spirit of God. I mean, it's like an enlightenment I feel with the spirit of God. I mean, you can sit there, just sit in the park or sit by the room, just sit there and you feel that enlightenment and feel praise of God. You can sit there and start to meditate and pray and you feel that enlightenment from God. I mean, you just feel something that's automatically different from your surroundings.
Yeah. Enlightenment. It provides us with enlightenment. In fact, there is something called the tefillah, with the Shmona Esrei, the 18 benedictions that are recited every day in traditional Jewish traditional services. We don't recite it here. It's actually in the prayer book here. But the fourth blessing of the 18 blessings that are in the says that exactly. That our enlightenment, our ability to think and formulate thoughts, to become enlightened about life, that is a blessing from God. Honein hada'at, who graciously bestows hada'at, knowledge with a capital K, meaning love, meaning how the universe works, and our appreciation for all of that. Yeah. They're very good. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Hi, Shabbat Shalom, man. Now, what about the word Eloheinu, our God? What does that conjure up in your, now Eloheinu, it's specifically directed at the Jewish people, our relationship to God. God is universal, but what makes our relationship to God different from, say, other faiths or other traditions? What's the difference? And difference is good. It doesn't mean we're better. It doesn't mean that we're superior. It just means that we're different. And the way I conceptualize it, but then I'm going to ask all of you, is that if God is eternal and beyond human comprehension, then there must be many pathways to God. And if there's contradictory pathways, I'll leave it up to God to decide which pathway is correct. All I know is the pathway that I have, that I connect as a Jew. So what does the word Eloheinu, our God, what makes us different? And difference is good. There's nothing wrong with difference. It doesn't mean superior, it doesn't mean better. When you think of the relationship that the Jewish people have to God, what comes to your mind? I know you came here not expecting this kind of a service, but that's okay. I told you we were going to do other different things throughout the summer. I wasn't just going to keep to the prayer book.
Well, giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai.
Giving of the Torah, right? So the Torah is one of the things that makes us distinct from other in terms of our commitment to it. Other people refer to it as the Old Testament, right? Implying that it's old, right? I mean, it implies that it's old. Well, there's a New Testament, right? And so that's one of the distinctions, that we don't think of the Old Testament, which is, they're referring to the Jewish Bible, as being old. We look at it as being our guide, right? So that's one of the distinctions. There's no New Testament that is superior, and we regard that God gave the Torah to our ancestors at Mount Sinai, whether that's a metaphor or whether it actually happened or whether you consider it to be a myth, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's part of our relationship to God. Most of the prayers, by the way, that you see in here, there are usually almost direct quotes from the Torah. The Shema is right out of the Torah, and the V'ahavta that follows. Anybody else on this Eloheinu, our God, and what makes us different? In the interests of time, if there's other things we want to cover, let's stand, and this is an affirmation. And Molly, lead us not only in the Shema, but also in the Baruch Shem and the V'ahavta.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Now, if you know these words, try to close your eyes and imagine this relationship. In traditional synagogues, many Jews will close their eyes, and the reason they close their eyes is it helps us recognize the eternal nature. If you don't know and you need the prayer book, of course, but if you really know the words by heart, just close your eyes again, and we're going to sing the Shema Yisrael and the Baruch Shem.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
Beautiful. You may be seated. Let's continue with the V'ahavta, which is really beautiful. Go ahead.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'kol levacha v'kol nafshecha
ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה, אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם מאוד על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. you look, and I'll keep this part very brief, if you look in the Hebrew, since we have a number of students of Maggie's here, if you look in the Hebrew, you will note, look at the word v'ahavta, the very first word in the prayer. You see some funny lines that are not Hebrew, like underneath the aleph, the second letter, you see looks like half of a rectangle. You see that little thing? And then if you go to the tav at the very end, you see those two dots above the tav. Does anybody know what that is? And you see those little marks all throughout. Those are accents. That tells us where to put the accent. Why do we need that? Because biblical Hebrew stopped being a spoken language in the time of the Second Temple. The biblical Hebrew that we read. And a group called the Masoretes got together and they did two things. They added vowels so that people would know how to read the Bible. Because again, if it's just you don't have the vowels or you have punctuation, how do you know where to stop after each sentence, right? So they could, because all of the scrolls before that time were like our Torah, doesn't have any punctuation in it, doesn't have any vowels. And if you have an unspoken language, how do you know to read? How do you know where the accents are going to be? How do you know if you didn't have any vowels and it wasn't a spoken language, how would you know where to put the accents in English? You wouldn't. You wouldn't know how. So what the Masoretes did, they had this tradition and they added this punctuation and they added accents. And that's what these little markings are, but you won't find them in the Torah. Okay. All right. We're going to go now to the Amidah, and we're going to try an experiment. I know that my cantor will not like it, but that's okay. She's just going to hate this. She's not going to hate it. You have a part that you need to sing.
Yeah.
And that is the Michalkel, beginning with Michalkel. And I know somebody here knows the Michalkel part. The Michalkel part on page 246. Go to page 246. Now, the entire Amidah, of course, can be chanted by the entire congregation. But the Michalkel part is actually usually sung by the congregation. Now, I know some people know, and probably some people here are here for the first time or may not be unfamiliar with it, but this is your part, actually. So I'm going to have Molly give you all a chance to kind of do this on your own. If you flounder a little bit, Molly will pick it up. I'm giving you my only order that I've ever given you, right? I've never told you not to sing. I've never said, but we're going to try it because we're in the mood. Okay, so let's rise. The Amidah is the part that precedes the silent meditation. Page 200, we'll start on page 244, and then when we come to the Michalkel on page 246, Molly will tone it down a little bit. He has such a beautiful voice, and we'll encourage everybody to sing it as a congregation. Go ahead.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagedol Hagibor V'Horah Elyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zocher Chasei Avot V'Imahot U'Mevii Geulah L'Bnei Bneihem L'Ma'an Shemo B'Ahava Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magid Avraham V'Yitzrat Sarah Atah
246.
לעולם אדוני, לחיי הכל אתה, רב להושיע.
מחכה
חיים בחסד, לחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, שונאי נופלים ורופאי חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, לשמי עפר, מחלום קבל גבורות, ומדום לאלוה, מלך במדום חיי, ומצמיח ישועה.
ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל.
And we turn now to page 248 for the what's called Kedusha, the sanctification. Just as we blessed God in the Baruch Hu, now we come to sanctify, to render holy God's name.
מקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, הכתוב היה נביאך, וקרא זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלך הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני, אדוננו מתי שמך בכל הארץ.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו ומלכנו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם,
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהייך ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. You can either continue in the prayer book, but what I would prefer is, first of all, for you to be seated, take a rest, and just pray, whether closing your eyes and just meditating or thinking about your connection to God, to life, and just that's what the silent meditation is really for, and to appreciate this special moment in time. At the bottom of page 260, we have this beautiful Oseh Shalom. The one who gives peace bimromav in the upper firmaments, may he give peace upon us, upon Israel, and upon all of humankind. And we'll say Amen. Ali, would you like me to lead us in the Oseh Shalom?
Oh, say shalom, shalom, Biromah,
Say Shalom Aleinu.
Ve'al Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Yaseh shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Oh, say shalom, shalom, Biromah. Say shalom, Aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen.
In the interests of time, let's turn to page 1152. This is the Torah portion for this week. You've had a lot of Hebrew already, so we won't take the Torah out, but rather it's more important to study Torah. And so let's go to page 1152.
Is that a different book?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot to mention. Yes, this is the Plout Chumash.
There's a couple of
What's the number?
It's page 1152. Good.
What page was it, Rabbi?
Yeah, page 1152. I need two really good dramatic readers. Anybody want to volunteer? Okay, no volunteers. That means I get to call on people. Wouldn't that be fun? Then you'll never come back again. So Priscilla, I'm going to call on you to read the first. I'm in English. I won't ask. And I know some people are very shy. You read the first 10 verses. And Rick, would you be so kind as to read the second, from verse 11 to verse 12? Those of you that have my kind of Plout, it opens like an English book. And it's a little confusing, but the page numbering, so it starts on page 1152, but then you go to your right and you start on the right-hand column. It's a little confusing for those of you that who are used to Hebrew books, or we open from left to right, right? You just turn the pages, and the columns are devoted more towards the Hebrew side. So Priscilla, would it be okay if I called on you to read the first 10 verses, and then Rick, if you would be so kind as to read the next 10 verses.
Okay, so it's 1152.
And 52. Yeah. The Israelites, as it begins, the Israelites arrived in a body at the wilderness of Zin. Oh, 1,152?
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little confusing if the book opens on the English side.
Starting with the Israeli lions.
Right.
Arrived in a body.
Yeah, that's it.
Israelites arrived in a body at the wilderness of Zin on the first new moon, and the people stayed at Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. The community was without water, and they joined against Moses and Aaron. The people quarreled with Moses, saying, "If only we had perished when our brothers perished at the instance of the Lord. Why have you brought the Lord's congregation into this wilderness for us, and our beasts to die here? Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us to this wretched place, a place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates? There is not even water to drink." Moses and Aaron came away from the congregation to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces. The presence of the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "You and your brother Aaron take the rod and assemble the community, and before their very eyes order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts." Moses took the rod from before the Lord, as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock?" And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. Out came copious water, and the community and the beasts drank.
Very good. Rick, would you go on, please?
Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels." I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. You can repeat that. That's a very key verse, by the way. So go ahead.
And he said, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of the rock?" And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. Out came copious amounts of water, and the community and their beasts drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them." Those are the waters of Meribah, meaning that the Israelites quarreled with the Lord, through which he affirmed his sanctity. From Kadesh, Moses sent messengers to the king of Edom. "Thus says your brother Israel, you know all the hardships that have befallen us, that our ancestors went down to Egypt, that we dwelt in Egypt a long time, and that the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and our ancestors. We cried to the Lord, and he heard our plea, and he sent a messenger who freed us from Egypt. Now we are in Kadesh, the town of the border of your territory. Allow us then to cross your country. We will not pass through the fields or vineyards, and we will not drink water from wells. We will follow the king's highway, turning off neither to the right nor to the left until we have crossed your territory." But Edom answered, "You shall not pass through us, else we will go against you with the sword. We will keep you to the beaten track," the Israelites said to them, "and if we are or our cattle drink your water, we will pay for it. We ask only for passage on foot. It is but a small matter." But they replied, "You shall not pass through." And Edom went out against them in heavy force, strongly armed. So Edom would not let Israel cross their territory, and Israel turned away from them.
Okay. So we have two stories here. Down and first, any thoughts or any questions or insights that came to you as you heard these two either story, and maybe ask yourself, is there a connection between these two stories? Anyone? Yes,
I don't
Christine.
understand the part where the Lord was angry at Moses and Aaron for the way they didn't affirm the sanctity in sight of the Israelite people.
You didn't understand that part. So did somebody want to give just the plain answer? What was the issue there? Why was God upset?
Because the Israelites didn't trust God, and that Moses represented the leadership of the community.
Right, but what did God command the children? What did God command Moses and Aaron to do?
Talk to the rock.
Talk to the rock, right? And what did Moses do?
Struck the rock.
He struck the rock, right? And so God didn't get angry at the Israelites. God got angry at Moses and Aaron. What was in the narrative, just dealing with the story, what was it that God was upset about? What, I mean, it's there, it's in the text, it's not a trick question, you're not asking for any insights, it's right there. What was it that God said that, that was the basis for his anger?
Because you did not trust me enough.
Right, didn't trust me, and there's another part there. To do what?
To affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people.
Right. So there's two things that in the narrative that God got upset about. One was the lack of faith that Moses and Aaron demonstrated before God. You didn't trust in me enough. And the other part was the whole part about speaking to the rock as opposed to striking it was to sanctify me in the eyes of the people. Now, I spoke last night on this subject a little bit, and there was a key phrase in the text that showed a difference in the way the Israelites thought about themselves. And that's why God raised the stakes, so to speak, instead of striking the rock this time, to speak to the rock. The Israelites referred to themselves when they quarreled with Moses and Aaron, when they strove with them, and they presented their argument, and it sounded very similar to all the other arguments, right? Why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? They said that at the Red Sea, they said that in other places, there was another incident involving water, there was another incident involving quail or meat, and each time, why did you bring us out here? You brought us out here to die, blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing over and over and over again. But this time there was something different in the text. It wasn't in those other arguments. And that was, how did they refer to themselves in relation to God? Go back to verse, when they made their argument to God, which sounded so similar, verse 4. How did they see themselves?
They call themselves the congregation of God.
Yeah, they saw themselves as the Lord's congregation. They had never said that before. They never said that we were a congregation of God, or that we were the Lord's congregation. The word kahal is a very important word. In fact, many temples in their Hebrew will adopt kehilat adat Israel, the congregation of those who are witnesses of Israel. I mean, I'm just making up a temple name. There's many temples that have the word kehilah. You'll hear that in Hebrew of many temples and in many conservative synagogues as well. So the word kehilah has a sanctity kind of name attached to it. You just don't use it as a throwaway. So this was the first time that the Israelites had referred to themselves, not Moses or God, but the children of Israel, which was a step up from where they were before. And is it logical that you could get water by speaking to the rock? No, of course not. Striking the rock, would that bring forth water? But God had already done that. That magic trick had already been done. So that wasn't anything new. And where were the children of Israel coming from? Yeah. Coming from Egypt. They didn't really know much better, other than what happened at Sinai. Miracles don't change the way we look at life ultimately.
Could only Moses hear God's voice?
Except at Sinai. Yeah. The people in the narrative, they get too afraid. And they want Moses to go up. But they did hear at one time the voice of God, but the rest of it, you're right. Now, I titled my little talk this morning, Is Life Fair? Is there anything that seems unfair in this story?
Sure.
Yeah.
The fact that Moses followed God's command, led the people out of Egypt, lived in the desert for 40 years, and now all of a sudden it's like, you're not going with it.
Yeah, by the way, they're near the end of the 40 years. It's not like they got to wait another 25 or 10. They're right on the edge. They're about ready to go in. That's what Deuteronomy, we're getting close to the book of Deuteronomy. They're not far away now. The years have gone by, and they're close to getting in. And moreover, what else happens in the story that we haven't even touched on? Something else happens in verse 2 that could explain Moses' behavior. Verse 2, verse 3.
Miriam dies.
His sister dies. The one that pulled him out of the water, the one that followed him down to the water. You've all seen the movie, right? You didn't need the text for that, right? She follows and then she gets the kid gets little Moses to go back to his mother, and it's his sister. His sister saves his life. Right? Nothing about Moses' feelings, no sense of mourning, no sense of loss. That, from human perspective, could explain, Moses' anger or his shortness of temper. Maybe he and Aaron were grieving. I mean, the text doesn't say that, but it's logical for us, midrashically, to think along these lines. So we're all here, with the exception of two people. We've had, or three people, I should say, a fair amount of life experiences, right? All of us here collectively, with the exception of a few people in this room. What wisdom can you share about life's fairness with some of the younger people who are here? Is life fair? Is it fair? I mean, what's your collective wisdom on the subject? No, I have a great therapist here, and she's shaking her head no. She's probably heard way too many stories about how unfair life is. You're shaking your head no. You didn't have to expand on that though. Why do you think life is unfair? By the way, I think I agree with you. I think life is unfair, but that's a psyche part of me that I don't want to go to. So but I'll let you all go. Explain to me why do you think life is unfair?
Bad things happen to good people.
Okay.
Lots of very bad things.
Yeah.
Illness, crime, accidents.
Being told by God you can't fulfill your dream.
After you've worked so hard for it.
Yeah. Exactly. Michelle, you shook your head and smiled. Can you start a little bit on that?
Things that have been in the news just in the recent months. How do you find fairness in that? The shootings.
Yeah. That clearly isn't fair. The range of people who died. An 88-year-old man who just went on a parade, went to look at to be part of a July 4th celebration is shot.
He didn't want to go.
What's that?
And he did not want to go.
You need one of them. Yeah. Rick, you had some thoughts on that subject.
I agree that life isn't always fair, but some of the unfairness can be traced back to our own decisions.
So there is a decision-making element that can lead us to.
The shootings, not.
These shootings are random, and sometimes terribly random things happen. Yes, Jack?
But we always have a way to recoup and regenerate through God, the same way you go down and you come back up.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty.
Yeah.
I mean, you can pray and you can change your way of whatever you're doing to make it right.
And that's one of the major purposes of prayer, is it gives us the hope and the capacity in some respects to change. It can motivate us to seek help for problems that we have, to go to really good therapists like Priscilla who practice, and get help and get comfort and get the kind of empathy they need and love they need to move forward. I mean, that's one of the purposes of prayer, is exactly like you said. It's not just to praise God, but it's also to do this reflect so that you can think of ways to go forward. They're beautifully said. And anybody else on this topic? You've taught me something, Jack. That was really, really good.
That's the first time I've ever told you that.
You will all
We
teach
can all
me.
learn.
You guys are always teaching me something. I have not been to a congregation where I have not learned a lot of things. I think there's a thing this rabbi once said, I've learned more from my congregation. I've learned more from my students than I have taught. And I think there's a lot of truth to that here. I wrote a little bit about that in my bulletin. Those who read it carefully, that I'm really in awe of what you've all accomplished here over the decades and over the century, over almost 2 centuries of time. What you've all done. I'm reading a little bit now about the history of Southern Jewry, and it's this Kehillah. It's easy in Chicago. It's easy in New York. It's even easy in Hanover, New Hampshire, Rabbi Mal, but it ain't so easy here. It's hard, and it's been hard.
And it's getting harder.
And it's getting harder. But you're here. You've made a minion. And we look at that response, and we look at people who have come here on today, not under the easiest of circumstances, to pray, to be part of a congregation. I mean, it's easy when you have a big congregation. And by the way, their attendance, percentage-wise, is way less than our percentage of what I hear. I don't know if that's true, but that's because of Molly. I mean, we all come from Molly, and we all come for Andy, because they're really, their hearts are so great, and what they bring to us.
We come for everybody.
We come for it.
Exactly. We all come for
We all
everybody.
need people.
Yeah. And there's a lot of strength in that. There's a lot of faith in that. You all have Manta, despite whatever challenges that you all face in life. I know all of you. We all have our challenges, and everyone in this room I know have challenges. To share one, and I'm not bringing it up. Jack, 3 weeks ago, was a terrible case. Is that okay for you?
Yeah, no.
Terrible case of COVID. I mean, terrible. I mean, really, really sick. He was today. Back in the congregation, back at temple, yesterday, last night, and today. And that, I don't know about you, but I find that inspiring. It inspires me. I mean, there's a lot of goodness in this whole month and me. Now, I'll close with this. And before I get too harsh on Moses and so forth, what does Moses do? What does the text tell us that Moses does afterwards? What doesn't he do, and what does he do? What would be the normal response to having your dream broken by God? What would be the anger? Yeah, anger. And what happens right after that? What does the text tell us that happens? What's the part that Rick read? What was that? Is there any interlude between what happens at the rock and what happens next, which is they continue on their journey? And who's the leader?
It says from Kadesh, Moses sent a messenger to the king of Edom.
Right. So what's happening?
He's going about the business that he has to go about.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's really the strength of the Jewish people.
Say that again.
Oh,
He's going about the business of life. He has to get the people into the land, so he's trying to get them to get permission to go through Edom.
that's the greatness of Moses, is that tremendous personal discipline. And not a word is mentioned, not a word is said. And then the next thing he does is, I still have to get the people there. And that's what he does. And I think with that, we'll stop and we'll conclude our service. Thank you. This is good discussion. Thank you. All right. Let's rise for the Aleinu. We have a wonderful lunch awaiting, so we'll move this along. Oh, excuse me. Let's go to the Misha Beirach prayer first on page 371. Page 371.
Please join with me.
May the source of strength to bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
We include in our prayers, of course, Rhoda Bennett, Harold H. Fink, Glory Weisberg, Judy Stein, David Cherniak, Harry Appleman, Ellie Appleman, Phyllis Feibelman, Dr. John Johnson, Mark and Hetty Blinderman, Elise Zeman, Jennifer and Amy Sunberg, Pam Fisher, Nicholas Kazantzis, Mike Thornton, Bettina Prager, Lou Lartigue. Does anybody have anyone they wish to add?
Carolyn Perry and Maud Anderson.
Thank you. Kathy McVeigh.
Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, their renewal of body, their renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
And we remain standing now for the Aleinu, page 586.
Aleinu leshaveh
Chladon hakol,
לתת כתובה לרצה בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי
הרצון, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה,
שלא
שם חלקנו גוהם,
וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך
V'haya Adonai Limelech al kol haaretz. Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad. U'shemo
You may be seated. This week we observed the yahrzeit of Terry Barkin. Is there anyone observing the yahrzeit who they wish to remember at this time?
Dolores Road,
Thank you.
we are tied and Harry Parkinson the same day.
Terry Barkin was the only one that was on the yahrzeit list. But thank you. Thank you.
Thomas Mogensen.
The Mourner's Kaddish, page 598. Let us rise and include those who, in our thoughts and prayers, those who were tragically killed in Highland Park this past week. Page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah B'alma divrach chidutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiran b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabbanim shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. You may be seated. Torah study will be next Wednesday at 5:30. Adult Hebrew, as you all know, will be, there's two classes, one a beginner's class at 12 on Tuesday, and then again on the advanced class, which all of you are in, is will be at 3 o'clock. Okay. I want to thank once again Andy and Molly for making these services so beautiful and providing opportunities for everyone to participate, and particularly those who are homebound. Did anyone come online today? No? Okay, everyone came here. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, we're going to conclude with Molly's choice.
Oh, it's Molly's choice.
Molly's choice. Yes.
What's
your favorite? What's your favorite?
I can't think of a favorite right now.
Okay.
I thought Ein Kelohenu we had.
Ein Kelohenu, we haven't done Ein Kelohenu in a long time. I don't know if we've ever done it. Okay. Ein Kelohenu is on page 626.
I'm going to go very traditional. We'll do the hymn since we were talking about the Union hymnal.
Yeah.
So we can just do, we don't have, we'll see how far we get with all the verses.
Oh, the word ein is the key word. There is none. As ein ke, everything is ein ke. Okay.
Ein
Eloheinu, ein Kadoneinu, ein Kemalkeinu, ein Kemoshienu, mich Eloheinu, mich Adoneinu, mich Kemalkeinu, mich Kemoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adoneinu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adoneinu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adoneinu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu. Shabbat Shalom. If anyone is familiar with how to deal with the kitchen, we have a wonderful oneg after that's all mostly been prepared. Please stay for a little lunch. Okay, Shabbat Shalom. We have hummus and we have crackers and we have
There's some pastries.
some delicious pastries. So please stay and join us.